Dig the tunes.
Yeah, that's my little background music, so it's not
Yeah.
it's not like dead air when no one's talking. But
Great.
yeah,
Feel like we're in a bar somewhere.
yes, that's exactly how it's supposed to feel, Scott. So
Like
I
a hotel,
appreciate it.
a hotel bar.
Yeah, and let me know if I need to turn it down or anything like that.
No, it's good. It's good.
Cool. Well, Scott, I really appreciate you coming on. This is my vision sales interview series, and I'll give you a little bit of background on what inspired this. But just live interviews that are very informal, no like formal podcasts with all the editing and all that. But some of the background, I was once interviewing for a sales role, and the hiring manager was like, I want you to go find 5 of the best sales leaders in the industry and interview them on like your transition from inside sales to field and like what they learned and some advice that they could give you. And that ended up being one of the best experiences of my life. I've made 5 really good relationships, but I learned so much. And I was like, wow, I feel like people should be able to have this type of experience. So I was like, all right, let's do that with my people that I meet throughout my career. How do I interview the best sellers I know and the best sales leaders I know and kind of give that little wisdom to junior sellers or aspiring sales leaders? You and I met at Sahil's event with Bravado, which was cool. Yeah. And we had a connection in common in Alex Kremer with the Alluviance group. And he taught me something pretty cool. It's like the purpose of a vision is not changing who you like, not so that you achieve it, but it's who it makes you today. And I wanted to kind of take some of that and help our audience embody some of the things that are working out there, right? So that's why I'm having you on today. But I really appreciate you joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to try to help. Good mission.
And for everyone like who's living under a rock who doesn't know who Scott Leese is, 12-time unicorn, 11-time exit, 6-time sales leader, incredible sales advisor for Series A companies or around that stage, right? You might be working with a lot of different companies, but just been crushing it. I'm really excited to dive into some connections here on just like what's working and what's what makes a hero or a zero kind of thing. That will be a topic that we talk about, but really appreciate it.
All right, let's do it.
Scott, I saw you post recently and it was talking about you didn't get into sales until you were 27 and you hated it at first. I would love to hear about those early days and like, how did you go from I'm 27, I'm picking up the phone and cold calling to like, I'm sales leader, I've made it.
Yeah. I mean, I spent the early part of my 20s struggling with some severe life-threatening illnesses and was in the hospital for 4 years, and I've had 9 major abdominal surgeries, 4 life-saving surgeries, got addicted to opioids when I was in the hospital, had to kick off of dope. So all that to say, I didn't have a career at all until I was 27 years old. So you just said you're 27 and I look at you and I'm like, look at all this shit that this guy has done already. You're so much farther down the road than I was at 27. It's like,
I was gonna say I'm 32, but I'll take it.
Right. So I took this entry-level sales role at kind of like a boiler room type startup environment back then, because it was one of the only things I could think of to like make up for lost time, earn more money. I was competitive. I had played 2 sports in college, and one of my friends thought I might be good at it. So I said, well, I don't know what else I'm going to do. I might as well try. And the very first day that I was there, we had like a morning of training for a couple hours. We went to lunch and I got thrown on the phones at like 1:00 when I came back from lunch. And I was like, wait a second, I'm supposed to like do this job already? I literally don't even know, what way is north and south yet. And that first day was so miserable and painful. I mean, I felt like the phone weighed like 10,000 pounds. I was terrified to pick it up. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I was driving home from work that night, and I was just telling, anybody who would listen, basically, like, I can't go back. This is like the worst, hardest job in the world. Like, I don't have what it takes. And my wife at the time sort of told me, like, what else are you going to do, basically? And it was like a punch to the gut. And I kind of had this awakening in that moment, which was, I've already dealt with the hardest thing that I'm hopefully ever going to have to deal with in my life. Why am I worried about cold calling? Why am I worried about getting fired? Why am I worried about hitting a quota? Why am I worried about somebody hanging up on me? And it was just like a little bit of an epiphany that ended up being very liberating and very freeing. And so I went back in the next couple of days and, tried to adjust my attitude and things like that. And I think little by little, it got a little better. And the 5th day that I was in this role, I stayed way later than everybody else. And I happened to, get a 1-call close. This was a very like fast, high velocity kind of transactional sales environment, low ticket kind of price point. But I closed this deal and, this like, it just like sales just like got its hooks in me in that moment, and I was like, what is this feeling? I want this feeling again. This is amazing. Right. And from that point forward, I just threw myself all in. I tried to become a student of the game. I tried to immerse myself in it. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to do better than I did the month before. Started setting different little goals for myself. And, I got lucky in the sense that right place, right time. I ended up doing really good. I got promoted into a leadership role very quickly. That team did really well, got promoted again into a senior leadership role. And like, before you knew it, I was a VP of sales and I was managing like 70 people. And I had, like a year's total business experience. So drinking from a fire hose, trying to figure out how to be a sales leader. The rest, as they say, is kind of history. And I just started popping from one early stage, VP of sales role to the next, and off we go.
Yeah, that's incredible. And now it seems like if you go to your LinkedIn, you see like 20 plus advisor roles. So
I have, if I added them all, it would be close to 170.
Okay. Wow.
I've done in the last 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
I don't add them all. Some people don't want me to put it on there. Some of them I might not want to put on there. Sometimes I just forget. But yeah, I've got enough on there that you can look at it and be like, oh wow, this guy's busy.
Yeah. I mean, you're seeing the common problems of a sales leader, and as like a fractional CRO, you're coming in and you're seeing what works and what doesn't. How do you decide, like talking about a hero or a zero, like how do you decide to put your name behind something when you're going into these?
Well, in the beginning, if I'm being honest, you don't really think too much about it because you need the business and you want to do the work and you want to try to be helpful. And then when you've been doing it as long as I have now, you realize that the ceiling for some of these companies is just not as high. And some of them are, you don't want to say destined to fail, but like it's going to be hard for them to succeed. And when you're in a position of strength and you have enough business and you're earning good money, you then get the ability to say no to people. And not all money is good money. There's such a thing as a bad client. And, you don't really want to attach yourself to scottandzach.com if the product is terrible, if you think that the leaders are no good, if you don't think there's a path to them succeeding. And so you try to, vet these things as best you can and say yes to the ones you think have a good potential, because if those succeed, that's, kind of like a testimonial. It's like a logo, right? It's like, oh, Zach worked with those guys, he must know what he's talking about. So you're just always trying to add as many of those kinds of things as you can. It's very difficult in the beginning to be diligent enough to say no to working with certain people, at least for me. If you can do it from the beginning, God bless you. I wasn't able to do that in the very beginning. I've just tried to start getting better at it, as the years have gone by.
Yeah, for sure. And I see a lot of go-to-market tech as clients of yours. I'm sure that there's other verticals that you get into. And the space is changing so fast, right? Like I'd be curious from your perspective, what works today that didn't work 2 years, like even as recent as 2 years ago? Because this, like, everything is changing with AI and all these sorts of things.
It's a good question. I'm not actually sure what works today that didn't work 2 years ago. I'm much more sure about what worked 2 years ago that doesn't work today.
Okay.
That one's way easier to answer. Nobody can really argue that pickup rates and success cold calling is declining. Nobody can really argue that response rates on cold email is declining. These are like inarguable facts. It doesn't mean that you need to and should completely stop doing those things. But if that's all you're doing, you're making a mistake. And those things are going out of style quickly. And I think over the long tail of it, might not work, in the foreseeable future really at all. So what is working for people to juice their pipeline and open opportunities is go to network kind of approach. It's utilizing partnerships and referral partners and utilizing influencer marketing and founders building brands and sales leaders building brands, and even SDRs and AEs like creating content, and that content creates exposure, and that exposure brings about some interest, and then you convert that interest into opportunity and opportunity into deal flow, right? So you've got people sort of turning themselves into a demand gen factory, and you got founders out in front creating content, positioning themselves as the expert in a particular field. So it's the combination of those two things that is working way better than anything else that I see out there right now. And the companies that I know and work with that are doing really well, they've really leaned into that. And it's much more about that than a couple of years ago when it was like, what's the 21-step sequence that is working so good right now. I don't hear people talk about that stuff anymore. I really don't.
Yeah. One thing our team's really been leaning into is just creating more content, but telling stories of from like things that are happening with either our own outbound efforts or like our own customers. We actually, this like small story about Sift. We implemented Sift for 25 dream customers without ever talking to them. We found value matches for them, or essentially prospects that have problems that they can solve. We screenshotted Sift and sent it to the heads of sales and CEOs of those dream companies. And we were getting responses consistently saying, this is the best email I've ever received. Like, what is going on? So we actually consolidated all of those responses, and Lee posted it, our CEO. And in a couple hours, we had 75 inbound demo requests. And we were like, I'm the only salesperson at the whole company. So I'm like, holy shit, what do we do now?
It's a lot of meetings. That's a lot of meetings for you.
Yeah. So these last 2 weeks have been crazy, but a lot of one call closes and a lot of like just good momentum that we're like, all right, maybe there's something to this founder brand thing.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's a perfect example of what I was trying to articulate right there. Yeah,
for sure. And I heard you talk about like referral networks. I saw you post pretty consistently on that. Seems to be like a hot topic for you. Is there anything else that you're like, this is something I'm pretty passionate about moving into the next couple of years, as well as you like predict there's a lot that's working with AI and there's a lot that's not working with AI. But yeah, I would love to get your perspective there.
I think you've got influencer-led motions, you've got network-led motions, you've got this sort of freemium distribution kind of models that have been helping. You've got micro communities, which is where people are going to, sort of vet certain pieces of tech and software. They don't go to G2 Crowd and stuff like that anymore. Sorry, G2. They just don't. They go into their little community and say, hey, I'm thinking about deciding between these three products. What's everybody's experience? And then they make buying decisions there. What's going to work 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I don't know. I really don't. I know that people are, as long as is there a way or a vision for people to think of how can we create billion-dollar companies with as few employees as possible and eliminate all sort of rudimentary tasks and whatnot. There's going to be somebody now who's going to try to build a 1 or 2 person company and everything else is done by bots and AI and all this kind of stuff. They're going to automate everything away. So is an automated SDR and AI SDR like a viable thing right now today? No, not right now. But you don't think the power of that tech is going to, expand exponentially over the next 5 years? What about the differences in buyers? I'm 47 years old. I grew up having to interact with people to buy stuff. But my 16-year-old is not growing up in that world. In 5 years, when he enters the workforce, do you think he's going to feel like he has to interact with a human being in order to make a purchase? Fuck no, he's not. He didn't grow up that way. He's not even going to want to. Do you think he's going to want to go in an office? No, he's like a COVID kid, and he walks around with his face in his cell phone all day long. Even when they hang out with their friends, go walk up to a group of teenagers or college kids. Shit, even adults at a conference. Most people have their face in their phone. So, how can you convince me that people are going to sell the same way in 5 to 10 years or buy the same way in 5 to 10 years? So, I think it's a really interesting period of time and potentially like very terrifying for people to think about and think about the future of the field and the profession and their relevance in it. And I think people are going to have to quickly learn lots of new skills. And I think that's very, very challenging for some people. If you would have told me 20 years ago, Scott, the way you're going to, make a living 20 years from now in sales is you're going to write all day long, I would have said, what? I have to be a writer? I didn't study journalism. I don't like writing. Oh, okay, Scott, well then you need to create video content. What? I'm not an actor. I'm not a theater kid. I don't know anything about video production, right? It's like, who knew that these things were going to be important? Those are not skills that were on anybody's radar back then. And I think that scares a lot of people, especially people who've been around for a while, who might not be as willing to learn new things and adapt new technology. And that's why I think you start to hear some people dig their heels in and resist some of the newer kind of strategies. And you get people who are very loud saying cold calling still works, you just suck at it. Cold emailing still works, you just suck at it. It's like, okay, maybe you're just scared. Maybe you're just scared to learn something new and try something new.
Yeah, for sure. And we've seen some like the AI SDRs out there. Like, sure, I think that tech has a potential future for sure. We've seen, instead of trying to automate the whole thing, like automate the entire person, what we're trying to do is automate the mundane tasks that keep a seller from selling like a human, right? So like researching all my accounts, finding the right topics, finding the right people. We're trying to automate all of that. So that's kind of where we're going, and we're seeing the pendulum swung really far, and now it's coming back a little bit. And we're trying to capture some of that. So it's been really interesting. But yeah, good take for sure. You mentioned you were thrown into the fire of like managing 70 people with 1 year's sales experience.
Yeah.
A lot, and like myself, when it was so hard for me to get that first manager role, because they always ask like, what's your management experience, right? It's like, I'm never going to have it unless someone gives it to me, right?
Yeah.
But you're like one of those battleground tested promote from within. What advice do you have for like aspiring sales leaders? They've crushed it as an AE, but they want to take that leap into sales management. What advice would you have for someone like that?
Well, the easiest way to break in is to stay where you are and get promoted. This like battlefield promotion, like you're talking about. The second easiest way is to leave and go to a earlier, riskier kind of opportunity, and just bet on yourself. It's going to be very hard to go from being an AE to getting a sales manager job at Salesforce. Be less hard to go from being a top producing AE to getting an early sales manager role at Sift AI. So my advice to people is always go bet on yourself. Go find an early stage opportunity, and you can get in there and drink from a fire hose, and they're a little more willing to, let you learn on the job a little bit. The second thing I would do is I would attach yourself at the hip to as many different mentors as possible, just like people you interact with and can message back and forth. Maybe you even pay for a community or a coach of some sort to help you get better. I think you listen to and read as many, podcasts and books and things like that. You go to webinars, you just become a student of the game. And it's not all sales leadership, it's just like leadership in general. I didn't read 1,000,001 sales leadership books, but I read books from famous coaches and leaders like Phil Jackson and John Wooden and Alex Ferguson and Ansel Dorrance. And like, these are famous sports coaches that are out there. And so you absorb all of that kind of leadership stuff, that communication stuff. So, those are, none of those are probably like revolutionary ideas, but I think that's what people need to do, and some people get stuck in that AE role and don't want to take that risk. And maybe my last piece of advice is it's only going to get harder. You're only going to have more responsibility. Your expenses are probably only going to get bigger. And usually when you take a bump up into a leadership role for the first time, you take a bit of a pay cut. So you might as well do that as early as possible before you're locked into like a mortgage, 4 kids, a spouse, all this kind of stuff. So if that's the direction you want to go, I always tell people get in early, because it's going to be real hard to walk away from, a guaranteed $300,000 as an AE one day and have to tell your significant other, and yourself, like, okay, I'm taking like a pretty big haircut here and it'll take me some time to go back financially, but hopefully I can get there. Like, do it early.
Yeah. And then you talk about starting your own business where you like make nothing, right?
Yeah. That there is a lot of truth to that. Like people ask me sometimes, how come you don't go start a, software business or whatever? It's like, I make nothing for the foreseeable future. Like, I earn really well right now. That's terrifying to me. And I guess if you've earned obscenely well, then the risk is like gone or dissipated quite a bit, right? But that's why so many companies are started by people who are in their 20s or by people who are in their 40s and 50s. There's not as many being started by people in that middle ground right there. Pretty hard to sleep on couches when you're 47 years old, trying to save money because you're bootstrapping. Like, I don't think that world is for me.
Yeah, my wife, if she was watching this, she's probably laughing her ass off because we had our first right when we like started SIF. So it was like, all right, you're going to do everything all at once. This is great.
Yeah. You're uncommon. You're uncommon in that regard.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned sales communities. Can you tell me a little bit about Surf and Sales? I'd love to hear about it and like what goes into that.
Yeah, it's a micro sales conference. We started it in 2017. Since 2018, we've been hosting 2 to 3 events per year. We usually host 2 in November and 1 in the spring. And the idea of it is to be completely different than your normal sales conference. A normal sales conference has thousands of people, and you're at a convention center or a big hotel somewhere, right? And it's 9 hours of content all day long, and cocktail parties and all this kind of thing. And it's in cities you've been to 1,000 times, like New York or San Francisco or Boston. It's like, I'm so tired of that. It's like not my scene. I don't want to get pitched by 1,000,000 vendors. I don't want to scan my badge just to get a water bottle from you. I don't want to deal with all that. So for people who are looking for a different type of experience, we throw this conference on the beach in Costa Rica. I rent 3 villas right on the water. We hire local surf instructors to give people lessons. We've got caretakers of the homes that we rent who cook us meals, who clean up after us. We get people pick us up from the airport. It's, total white glove like service. And we spend half the day doing sales content, entrepreneurship content, business content, and teaching and coaching people stuff. And then the second half of the day, we have some fun and we surf. And then you're networking and you're with a maximum of 20 people for 5 days. So you have the opportunity to build some real meaningful relationships and business partnerships and stuff like that. And people who have come all these years have said it's a transformational, life-changing kind of experience. And it's something that I'm quite proud of. That seemed really crazy and risky in the beginning, and now kind of hard to imagine it not being a part of my life anymore. So you check it out, surfandsales.com, SALES, surfandsales.com.
Surfing, I guess it's the new golfing, huh?
Yeah, man. Yeah. You put yourself out there, get out of your comfort zone, challenge yourself a little bit, be in nature. It's also cheaper than golf, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. Was there any other cool things you could share with us, or anything else any other wisdom you'd want to share with the audience?
Oh man, I'm not a vending machine. I can't just pop a quarter in and wisdom comes out. No, I don't know. I mean, I would tell people to really concentrate on building and growing a network, because I think it's very important right now, and it's only going to become increasingly important to both find a job and to, if you're in sales, open and create and close opportunities. I would go so far as to say you should be trying to make network growth one of your daily KPIs. Really kind of lean into that, and that you don't have to create content or be some kind of, social media guru or influencer in order to do that. All you have to do is just try to connect with people, and start there.
Awesome. Well, I'll certainly make that a goal. And Scott, I know one day we'll be working together in some regard.
Looking forward to it.
You're definitely on my roadmap, my plan. So I hope that we'll have the Scott Leese effect, is what I've called it internally.
All right. I'll be here when you're ready.
Thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
And we're done before your soccer game too. So
perfect. Liverpool kicks off in a few minutes, so I'm ready.
All righty, man. Well, appreciate it.
All right, Dad. Cheers.